Good morning. Thank you for joining us. It's 10. We're going to go ahead and get started. And people are always, of course, welcome to join a little bit later or nip out when you need to. But we're going to try and keep to the agenda because and the timelines because we're aware that everybody's time is so precious, most particularly now. So welcome to the series of WMG COVID webinars that we've been hosting on Friday mornings. WMG is the municipal arm of Wishart Law Firm, and it really is the child of Paul Cassan. Paul has practiced municipal law pretty much exclusively for over 20 years. He also does labor and employment law. When you have labor and employment and municipal merged together, he's in his absolute glory. So today, Paul is in an arbitration, and he spoke to me last night and asked me to convey to all of you his sincere apologies that he couldn't join us. And for a lot of people, they'd say it's my sincere apologies I can't join. Paul really means it. He really wishes he could be here. And I would say for all of us, this is our favorite part of the week. But for Paul, far and away, he absolutely loves hosting these seminars and loves touching base with all our municipal clients. So my apologies on behalf of my colleague Paul, but we're going to continue on today. I'm going to introduce the balance of the team. My name is Nuala Kenny. I'm a municipal lawyer. I was the city solicitor for in excess of 20 years in Sault Ste. Marie, and before that I was with the City of Ottawa. I was honored that the Law Society has deemed me a specialist in municipal law and planning and development law, and it is my real interest in the legal field to study municipal law. Joining me is my colleague, Tim Harmer. For a lot of people that don't know Tim, Tim is really a brilliant guy, and in particular with regard to research and legislation, he seems to go through it tirelessly, and we are really much better off for his service in this firm in all sorts of fields, but in particular in municipal law. Mia Carella has been with the firm for about 5 years. She does a great deal of municipal research. She's also a killer prosecutor. I think her conviction record is extremely high. She really enjoys the court work. And keep it in mind too, going forward, if you have prosecutions or I know a lot of municipalities have bylaws and they never actually hit go on enforcement. If you're looking at doing that in the future, Mia is an excellent resource, and she's a fantastic prosecutor. As you can tell by these seminars, she's got a very nice demeanor. She carries that into the court, but she's got a little bit of a killer bite to her too. So she's exactly what you need if you want to get some convictions. Also joining us is Lacey Lagori and Linda Hurdle and Britt Valley, and these are our real strong worker bees that end up doing all the paralegal work. If you see a typo on a sheet, you can bet that it is not their fault. It's one of the lawyers, because they go through and clean it up. And then, of course, I think in soccer she'd be the team manager, Brittany Hodgkinson, who keeps us all on the ball. And if you're wondering where the heck is the answer to this, that, or the other thing, I'm not getting a phone call, Brittany Hodgkinson is the one to call. She'll be polite to you on the phone, and then she'll come and whip us, and we'll respond to you. So that's our team. We're really happy. We work really. I think you can sense the friendship that we all have, and we also have a great deal of respect for one another professionally. And our hearty thanks to all of you once again for joining. I know your time is very, very precious. It means a great deal to us. There's a host of webinars you could be watching. We're honored that you choose to join us. Also makes us feel really good that you're all here in these trying times. Gives us a sense how everybody's doing, gives us a sense of comfort that people are feeling healthy and safe, and so we are delighted with that. A couple of little housekeeping matters. This is a Zoom meeting, so you're able to chat on the bottom. There's an icon that you can click. If you have a question, put it forward. It'll go to Brittany Hodgkinson. We try and answer questions at the end of the session if there's time. Quite frankly, there's a little bit of screening that goes on because some of the questions are either too substantive or they're going to require too much background research. So we try and answer the ones that we can on the fly, and the others we invite you to talk to us offline, and we will definitely get answers back to you. All of these sessions are available for AMCTO CPD points. If you don't know how to tally those up, please contact Britt Hodgkinson after the session or at any time, and she keeps tally and she'll let you know how you can do that. So it's a good way to keep your professional development points up during these, particularly during these quarantine times. And we're starting most of these sessions with a little poll just to get people's interest. And today our session is focusing a lot on the future and about the the prospect of reopening. So our poll is going to be reflective of that. So Brittany is going to help me in tallying the poll. And I don't know if you're able to do the split screen or not, Britt, but I'm going to read the questions that we have for our poll. Are you able to put them up for our audience?
Yes.
Beautiful. So the first question is, when do you anticipate returning to a full staff complement? Do you think it'll be June 1st? June 15th? Wrong poll?
It might be, yes.
Okay, I thought it didn't look like the right question, but I never trust my vision. Still the wrong poll?
Unfortunately.
Nobody tell Paul this happened.
Nobody.
He thinks he's so computer savvy.
Okay. It is going to have to be edited.
Well,
sorry, everyone.
Do you want to do the poll at the end, and maybe you'll be able to, but we do have a couple of questions talking about returning and reopening, and we'll let Brittany play with that during the session, and hopefully by the end we'll be able to execute it. And we'll tell Paul what happened at the beginning, so everyone has our backs on that. Perfect. So we're hearing a lot about reopening, and today we really wanted to focus on reopening from a municipal perspective. It's an interesting notion, the idea of reopening, because the virus hasn't changed. There's still no cure. There's still no vaccine. What we have done with the social distancing, with the hand washing, with the quarantine, is we've really lessened the strain on our health services. So the fear that a whole bunch of people would get sick at once and our health services would not be able to handle the pressure, that has, or is about to pass. That monster is floating by. So it didn't cure the virus, obviously, but it has lessened our concerns with healthcare. What that means is there's still a great deal of fear and trepidation, but we're hearing echoes that we're going to be going back to work. Now, those are sort of my introductory comments on municipal reopening, but I think Brittany has our poll ready, so I'm just going to shift back to that, and maybe we can weigh in on that, and then I'll continue my session. So our first question talks about when you think you're going to be returning to full complement. Do you think it'll be June 1st, June 15th, June 30th, or beyond June 30th? And then the second question is, do you feel that you have the adequate resources to return to full staff complement in the foreseeable future? So you can think about that during the session, and when you get a chance to weigh in, we'd appreciate it, and we like to tally the results and share them at the end of the sessions, kind of a little bit of audience participation. So we are looking with a view to reopening. So I have a couple of comments that I'd like to share with you, and hopefully it'll help you in your return and reopening. The first point I would say is the notion of reopening is one of hope, and I think all of us as individuals and all of our communities really do need that hope. It has been since March 17th, so more than a month that we've been in quarantine. For most of us, never in our lifetimes have we seen something like this. And to hear that there's reopening, it brings a hope and a buoyancy back into back into our communities and into our lives. So it is a good news story. It tells us that COVID was here, that it was a fatal and frightening virus, but as a species, we're going to survive it. And it is a much needed message of hope. In terms of municipal reopenings, the first thing we need to do, there's a lot of disadvantages about being a municipality. You're on the lower rung of the ladder in terms of other governments. But in this case, it's a very good thing because we can follow the lead from the federal and provincial governments. And in fact, we can follow the lead that has been taken globally. So the message that we're getting from all of those sources is the reopening is going to be gradual and it's going to be staged. And we're really suggesting that municipalities follow that model so that it is not a sudden reopening. I'm speaking sort of on a high level, and in future sessions, we'll be speaking in a little bit more detail, but start to turn your mind to what that means in terms of staging. Does it mean, we were speaking here, for example, at the firm saying, you know, maybe we have to introduce different shifts of work for people so that we're not, that we can maintain the social distancing, because it's expected that some of the restrictions that have been put in place, like social distancing and so forth, are going to continue. So think about what that means for your organization in terms of a gradual and staged reopening. When we look at reintroducing staff, the first concern is going to be safety, as it always is, but in these times it is most particularly paramount. So what we've been saying all along, and I'm sure everyone knows it now, in fact, we're almost getting into a danger of complacency, because people are so tired of hearing these things. But if you're sick, don't come to work. Make sure people that are sick do not feel pressured into coming into work. If you're sick, don't come to work. If you have symptoms, don't come to work. If you have symptoms and you're concerned it's COVID-19, go on the Ontario Health website, and they have a little pre-test that you can do to see the likelihood of you needing further testing. The social distancing, the hand washing, the messaging throughout your workplace where there's posters and you're reminding people. We were even talking here, and I think it's a great idea for lots of workplaces to start putting down, you know, what that social distancing, what that hockey stick length looks like in terms of little spottings on your floor so that people know where to stand. Think about PPE. We're going to have a session hopefully later on one of these webinars from an expert that we've been reaching out to, but as you can imagine, he's pretty taxed to talk about what is appropriate PPE and how it can be worn. And Mia and I were talking last night about how important it is to wear masks properly and how so few people do it. There's lots of resources there to show you actually how to wear a mask and gloves. I think Paul was telling us how he saw a person in a grocery store with gloves on, carefully looking at things, and then used his mouth to pull off his gloves. So there's tips, and it's not just enough to have the PPE. You have to make sure your staff is wearing it properly. Also, disinfectant wipes so that and proper cleaning. So all of those types of things need to be in place before you look at reintroducing staff. This is an obligation under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, that we are required to keep our workplaces safe for our workers. And now in the age of COVID, it means certain things like that in terms of cleanliness, in terms of distancing, and in terms of PPE. Next, I'm going to talk about pandemic proofing areas of gatherings. So we're going to be looking at, lots of municipalities have arenas, play fields, pools, and you need to start considering how you're going to, first of all, get people feeling safe enough to return to those. And one of the ways you can do it is by making sure that they're safe in those environments. It's going to look very different than it did before. I heard a turn of phrase the other day, and I really liked it. It was, we're going back to the new abnormal. And I think that's probably what we're going to see. So in terms of arenas, you might be looking at smaller audiences. You might be looking at Xing off seats that are not available to people to ensure that we have that level of social distancing. There's a discount airline that's headquartered in Las Vegas called Allegiant, and they're very concerned because they've lost a lot of business. Vegas is closed, and that's their headquarters, and that's mainly what they do, is bring folks in to gamble. So one of the things that I was reading they have introduced is they're going to have a little health pack for everybody as they enter the airplane, which will be a mask, gloves, and wipes for your seat and tray table. So another phrase that we've been reiterating all the time is creative and compassionate. So put your creative and compassionate hats on to think about how you can reopen your areas of gathering to pandemic proof them. I also want to talk about transit. Many municipalities run transit systems. I was reading also that New York City is looking at pedestrianizing their city. And I was curious about that because New York is just such a massive population base. And what they're doing is they're widening sidewalks, they're bringing in more bike paths. That, of course, is probably financially impossible for many of us, but the concept is there. If you can encourage people maybe to do more walking, more bike riding, more rollerblading. Even I know in Sault Ste. Marie, there was a group of young kids that one summer wanted to bring rickshaws. Now's the time to look at different types of transportation so that people are not confined only to mass transit, where you are stuck together very close. And within the mass transit, it's time to start looking at, do we put social distancing markings on the bus floor? Maybe screening for the bus driver. Are health packs something we should be giving to our passengers? Is that an affordable thing? Is that something we can do? So consider your transit system if that applies to you. Next, protect your main street businesses. Some of those people are not going to come back. Some of them are not going to recover. Small bars and restaurants, new businesses. There's a young lady here, I think she's just in her 20s, who opened a little boutique coffee shop, kind of out of the way, not quite on Main Street. She was starting out of the way and hoping to creep down to our Main Street, and she's finished. She can't come back. Your Main Street is the core of your community, and now is the time to really help those businesses survive. So if you have subsidies that you could unleash, if you can ask your treasurer to look at what sort of financial benefits we can give to these businesses so that they can get a fighting chance and come back in the game. And if you can't do it financially, maybe there's in-kind provisions. Maybe you can offer free advertising on city property, on city park benches, on buses, something to help them, because without a main street, we're all just tumbleweed ghost towns. And it is, anybody that's been in private business, anyone that has a family member will say, boy, that is a labor of love. Those people really, they get up early, they go to bed late, and it's just for these small little businesses that make our community so unique. Similarly, don't forget the arts and creative community. They're always operating on a shoestring, but those are the type of things that make a community worth living. They add to quality of life. Everybody's OP has a statement about the quality of life and the type of lifestyle that you can have if you live in our community. Art, the museum, the art galleries, dance theaters, those type of things are what makes life worth living and pleasurable. They're always broke, so now it's even more so. And it's very easy to say, you know, in one of the earlier sessions, I often say it, you know, municipalities are garbage and streets, and that's true. But if your municipality is just picked up garbage and the streets are drivable, that's not much of a place to live. So if you can help those vulnerable industrial sectors like your Main Street and the arts community, you'll do a great deal of service for all of your citizens. In the same vein, protect small communities. So if you are a small community, it's a good idea to band together with others. And you can do things like have a reopening task force, so that rather than each community having resources assigned to look at what we can do in terms of reopening, if you band together, particularly like if you're close, for example, in the Soo, we're very close with Prince Township, we're very close with St. Joseph's Island communities. I mean, we can all learn from each other, and we don't all have to spend money to achieve the same goal. I'll never do a session about COVID without saying communication. Communication is the backbone of this. Your community needs to hear from you, needs to hear that things are reopening, that we're on the right track. It is not too early for your council to start saying, we're listening to what's happening at the federal, provincial levels, and we are starting to implement similar models here so that we will be reopening, and we'll keep you posted, we'll keep you advised about it. And when this does happen, even in the early stages, it's important to continually monitor. So perhaps we open an arena and it was a mistake. Well, then we close it again. Perhaps we bring back a full complement of work and people are getting sick, or they're trepidatious, or you're just not able to accomplish the social distancing in your workspace. Well, then we regroup. We're not going to reopen and that's it. That's how it's going to do. Constantly monitor how your safeguards are working to keep your staff and your community safe. In future sessions, I'd like to talk about the actual employment aspect of it. And I know Paul will have a lot to say about work refusals and what about people that are not going to wear PPE or they whatever. And we will devote some time to that in the future. And we'll have specific employer rules that hopefully will help you in terms of the reopening. But that's sort of I guess, hopefully it'll help you to contemplate some of those issues about reopening. We can certainly do this together. And we also have a couple of reopening packages that we tailor to municipalities so that you can tell us, here's what our infrastructure is like, here's what our staff complement is, and here's, in the Sioux, I'll tell you, big draw is our arena. We've got the Sioux Greyhounds, we get musical guests, Cirque du Soleil played here. It's going to be very important to reopen that in a way that is safe. So we look at every municipality and say, what's your big draw? What's your big moneymaker? Let's get that up and running, and let's get it running safely. So if you're in that boat and you're concerned about it, please give us a call. We'd be absolutely delighted to tailor our packages for you so that you can bring your people back safely. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Tim. Tim, I told you, is a legislative hound, and he's going to give us a legislative update on some new regs that have been enacted related to COVID. So, Tim?
Yeah, thanks, Nuala, and thanks everyone. I know Nuala had mentioned, I think we'll try and get to some of the questions at the end of the session. I know some are coming in, and so we'll try and address those later in the session. But please do, as they come up, please do add them to the chat so that they don't. I know with sometimes if I don't do that, it goes out of mind and I lose my train of thought. So please do add them as you think of them, and we'll get to as many as we can. I imagine a lot of people saw, and it issued shortly, I think, after our webinar last Friday, which was an announcement from the Premier about reopening. And the province, as Nuala was talking about, the staging of bringing people back to work, the province as well has talked about having a staged reopening of the province, and we're seeing the first steps in that respect. There was an announcement last Friday, and one of the things I'll talk about towards the end of my session is the change to marinas, which I know I've spoken about in a number of our past webinars. I know that's an issue that everybody's looking at because of the fact that we're hopefully, although we're I think getting snow or supposed to be getting snow today, but I believe everybody's still looking forward to the start of boating season. So marinas are an important issue and something the government has turned its mind to. In terms of the staged reopening that the government has planned, there was an announcement last Friday, as I think it took place shortly after our webinar, and there was another announcement on Wednesday of this week as well, detailing more plans to reopen. And what I'd like to do for everyone, because I think it's useful in terms of the way it's staged, what I actually want to do is tell you the specific dates on which various places are permitted to reopen. I have a list with me. You can find this information online as well. But I did want to go through it because instead of piecing together the information from both of the announcements, I preferred to go through a list to give you guys the dates, and obviously if there's any questions about what some of these reopenings mean, we can hopefully answer those as well. So as the announcement last Friday stipulated, there were a number of businesses were allowed to open as of Monday of this week, May 4th, and so some of those these included lawn and landscaping companies. Perhaps most importantly, from a municipal perspective, there was also some changes to the essential construction projects, and so those included things like shipping and logistics, broadband, telecommunications and digital infrastructure, any other project that supports the improved delivery of goods and services, municipal projects. So the government specifically identified municipal construction projects as being essential and able to reopen as of May 1st. or May 4th, I should say. Other essential project, colleges and universities, child care centers, schools, and site preparation, excavation, and servicing for industrial, institutional, commercial, and industrial and residential development. So the most important one, obviously, for us is municipal projects. We know now there was some confusion. I believe Nuala and I may have spoken in a previous webinar about some of the projects that we believed could continue to move forward under the essential construction pre the announcement last Friday, because they had to do with critical provincial infrastructure. And some municipal projects we believe would have fallen within that exemption to remain ongoing. But now we know that municipal projects in general, municipal construction projects, as of May 4th, can reopen as they've now been deemed essential. So some other businesses that were allowed to reopen May 4th: automatic and self-service car washes, auto dealerships by appointment only. Golf courses are allowed to prepare for the upcoming season, but must remain closed to the public. And marinas are preparing for a recreational season as well. And so I want to talk. I'm going to return to marinas at the end. I'll let you know what a marina is able to do at this point. We've had questions about boat launches as well in past sessions. Boat launches being distinct from marinas, of course, but now marinas are able to reopen in a limited capacity. May 8th, that as of today, garden centers and nurseries are permitted to reopen. Tomorrow we'll see hardware stores and supply stores reopen. May 11th, retail stores will actually be allowed, and this is a good sign, and sort of dovetails with what Nuala was saying about your main streets and certainly our main street in the Sioux. Retail stores with a street entrance will be able to open again for pickup or curbside pickup. So what that means is those stores will be able to reopen, but they'll be able to reopen only for curbside pickup. So it won't be a complete return to normalcy, but at least those businesses, many of which would be probably located on main streets in the downtown area, as say those ones that have a street entrance are going to be permitted to reopen. Also, below grade multi-unit residential construction projects like apartments and condominiums, May 11th, those are going to be able to open again as well. Certain above grade projects are of course going to be allowed to continue, and so there are some construction projects in addition to those I listed that are able to open as of May 11th. That's in essence the list of business reopenings, and as I say, that I wanted to give you guys that's a combination of the last two provincial newsroom announcements. And so I wanted to give that to you guys all in one succinct package, because I feel it's easier to do that way. And I wanted to speak about marinas, of course. Marinas, obviously, we're all looking forward to getting out in the water. We're not quite there yet with marinas. Marinas can reopen on a limited basis. I mentioned they can reopen, provided they ensure that they're only repairing or servicing boats or other watercraft, that they're placing boats or other watercraft in the water to be secured to the dock until such time as the province allows them to fully reopen to the public. But what that means essentially is a marina can put a boat in the water, have it moored to their dock, but the public they're not permitted to open up to the public to allow the public to then come to the dock to do anything with their boat or watercraft. Marinas are also permitted to open in terms of providing services that may be required to, as we talked about before, allow another session, I think, enable individuals to access their prime place of residence. That's distinct, of course, from seasonal cottages, which the government is continuing to discourage. They don't want people to use the marinas yet to access their cottage. So a marina could allow, I should back up and say, a marina, provided that a person required their vessel to access their primary place of residence, the marina could, for that specific individual, allow them to access their boat for that specific purpose. Marinas could also open to support government operations or services. That could include law enforcement, for example, support transportation of items by commercial barges. So that's another distinct area that they're allowed to open for. And the province has we talked about seasonal cottages, and I also want to mention recreational boating is still a no-no from the government's perspective. They are saying specifically in the new guidelines that the person who operates the marina shall not permit the marina to be used for recreational boating purposes, except with respect to placing the boats in the water and repairing or servicing boats. But again, it can't open to the public except for those people who need their boat to access their primary place of residence, their home, not their cottage. And the government certainly doesn't want people to encourage people doing that or to do any recreational boating at this time. That's the take on marinas. Again, they are separate from boat launches, although marinas themselves may have boat launch facilities in them. But a boat launch is different, as we spoke about in other webinars. And I've seen recently an increase in municipalities that had closed their boat launches, looking to reopen those. And so, if anybody has questions specifically to their own boat launch and wanting to get those reopened and wondering how to do that and what's permitted in terms of that, please reach out. If you have a general question about that we can answer, please add it to the chat. But I'd be happy to talk with anybody about anything that we've spoken about in the webinar. But I know boat launches and marinas have been a difficult topic in the past, and so happy to provide any clarity I can on that. So that is essentially what I wanted to speak with you guys about. If anybody wants a link to those, a list of those places of business and when they were able and are able to reopen, please reach out and we can hopefully direct you to that. But what I'll do now is I'll return it to Nuala to introduce Mia's topic, and I'll remain available to you guys at any time that you need to talk to me or have any questions at all.
Thank you, Tim. That was a great overview. And as we're seeing more businesses open, we're also seeing a lot more traffic on the roads. And I don't know, we were having a discussion here. People seem very enraged. I think the quarantine is getting to people. There seems to be a lot of short tempers and fast driving and poor driving and rudeness. And I think it just comes from being cooped up. And so we always like Mia to do, we were calling it Mia's tips and tricks, but I think it's better if we say it's Mia's potpourri. And it's just a bunch, it's in keeping with her Italian heritage. And she just has sort of a mishmash of things that she keeps her eye on during the week to prepare for these webinars, and very often focused on people's mental health and safety during this time. So Mia, I hope you've got some great ideas for us again today. Thanks.
Thanks, Nuala. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Really happy to have everybody here. So my intention with the helpful reminders for municipalities is kind of to reiterate what we've talked about in the last few webinars, and then to kind of bring some new ideas to the table and just some things to keep in the back of your mind as we progress through this and as we're kind of heading towards reopening and recovery and kind of getting things to the new normal, as a lot of people are referring to it as. So as we've talked about the last few weeks is, everybody's overwhelmed. And I think now, Nuala kind of alluded to this, that because we're so cooped up and now it's kind of starting to get to us, we want to get outside, we want to get that fresh air, we want to get back to work, get things back to normal. We're still feeling very overwhelmed with everything that's going on. So like I said, every time you feel overwhelmed, remember those safe places. So keep everybody safe and healthy is number one. Always keep up-to-date infection protection tips on site for your workers. That's something very important. And keep up to date with any government policies that the Ontario government is putting out, and any kind of guidelines that they may have to keep your workplaces safe, because those are always changing. We find that things aren't staying the same for very long, and we're always getting updates and different ways to handle what's coming at us. So it's important to keep your employees informed as well. If some are working at home and some are still working at the physical building, it's important to make sure that everybody's getting the same information. So, you know, hand hygiene and you know, covering your mouth when you sneeze and cough, and wearing masks. Although people working remotely, you know, when they're in their home, they're not necessarily worried about that. But if you're working at the physical building, you don't want to limit that information just to people that are working at the physical building. You want to make sure that all your employees are getting the same information. Another safe place to go to is focusing on managing the challenges and be prepared for recovery. We've talked a lot about this, but I just want to reiterate to consistently be thinking ahead. It's not a bad idea to keep in contact with suppliers that you may use, or with businesses that you contract with for services, because you want to ensure that when things are getting back to the new normal, that you can continue to deliver those services. Like Nuala had mentioned, and I think I talked about this last week, communication is key right now. Communicate in a way that a clear message is coming out, and use the right language. And like I said last week, sometimes when we're overwhelmed, we sometimes use negative language. Positive language right now is extremely important. So we want to stay focused on the priorities. And if you have, you know, residents that are asking questions of the municipality about different services or different things that are going on, it's important not to take too long with responses. Have a process established internally with respect to how you're going to field questions and who's going to respond to inquiries about things. And if you need to look more into something that a resident is asking you, don't be afraid to say, you know what, I want to get you a little bit more information on this. Do a little bit of quick research. If it's something that you feel like you need to reach out to us to, please do. We'd be happy to assist you. But it's important that you get back to the residents quickly, but with the correct information. So when we were talking about leadership last week, credibility is huge in leadership. So have a good understanding of the facts, and this applies to communication, like I said, as well, and be confident in what you're communicating. Again, positive language is very important. Last week I had touched on risk management. So like I said, it's important to kind of shape the path through COVID-19. And you know, we had our webinar last week, and then we looked at Ford's announcements, and he had made all these new decisions. So the path that we may have had last Friday is certainly different than the path that we now have in mind today. So that's always changing. And it's important to continue navigating the risks as that path changes. So identify those risks when you're making decisions, pause for a moment, and then think about the risks and benefits. And like I said, gather as much information as you can. Be agile. Never stop questioning and researching and learning and looking for new information. Like I said, our plan 3 months ago, our plan last week, our plan a few days ago is certainly different than the plan that we have today. So things are constantly changing, and don't be afraid to consult with others, because their new normal might be a little different from our new normal, but we may be able to learn from what they may be doing that may help us doing what we're doing. And the same thing with you within your municipalities. Don't be afraid to see what others are doing, because eventually we all have to work together. So I think that's very helpful to remember. There's always a few things that we can keep on a checklist, and that's, again, keep focused on your priorities, stay informed, always assess and reassess, review response plans, communicate, and safeguard your organization. like Nuala had mentioned earlier, right now there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of anxiety, there's sometimes feeling of burnout because again, we're so overwhelmed. So, you know, we may be concerned about our family's well-being, you know, fear of getting sick with COVID itself, worrying about, you know, our organizations and jobs and keeping everybody employed. Everybody's worried about that. So there's a lot of things that we can remember and tips for taking care of ourselves. So again, practice social distancing, but it's important to also stay socially connected to our loved ones, to our coworkers that we haven't seen in a while if we've been working remotely. And, you know, there's ways to keep in contact by email, phone calls, video chats, social media. Last night, my friends from law school, I have one that lives in Ohio, one that lives in Michigan, and one that lives in Toronto. So last night we said, you know what, I think it's time for us to all have a Zoom call, and we did, and we caught up because everything's different. Like what's going on here is different than what's going on in Ohio. It's different going on in Michigan. So we all wanted to make sure that the four of us were safe, and you know, what's going on, how are you guys handling it, how are your families handling it? So it's very important to keep in touch with people, because you then have that positive outlook forward, and you think to yourself, things are going to be okay, we're going to be okay, and we're going to get through this. So mentally, those are some tips to think about, and you know, try to get outside and go for that walk, and think about how to use any unexpected flexibility that you have throughout your day. Balance is key. Stay focused, but it's important to know when to take a breather and stay informed. But sometimes too much information, you get on information overload, and it may not be as beneficial as you want it to be. So limit how often you check resources. Things are changing rapidly, but daily changes are not likely to affect how you're managing things, because everybody's doing a great job and should continue on the path that they're on. And it's always good to remember to do something fun for yourself, and just take some quiet time. So that's what I have to say about your mental health and your physical health, and kind of, you know, getting through this with a positive attitude. One point that I did want to make and kind of have everybody turn their minds to this is Tim talked about cybersecurity, but I think it's also important for your organization to maybe look at your insurance policies that you have for the organization and how it speaks to cyber risks, and you know, if people are working remotely, what they're protected against, and things like that. So I urge everybody just to kind of take a peek at that, maybe contact your insurance provider and make sure that all risks associated with having your staff working remotely is covered under that policy. I think that's something important. I was just reading up on some literature about that the other day, and I said, you know what, that's something I need to add to my helpful tips and reminders, and just kind of put a little bug in your ear to look at that, because you also have a lot of individuals that are working from home, and you want to make sure that they're safe working from home as well. So just keep that in mind. So those are my helpful tips and reminders for this week, and I'll turn it back to Nuala.
Fantastic, Mia. Thank you very much. And I like that your tips are simple and they're easy to remember. No question, this COVID-19 pandemic is going to leave scars on the world and on us as individuals and on all of us as communities. But it's also is going to leave a new way of doing business. Just for those of you that lived through Y2K, I mean, that was sort of a tempest in a teacup, but at the end of it, I don't think any community didn't have an emergency plan, an emergency preparedness package. And even as individuals and homeowners, we started to think about what to do in case of an emergency. And so too, there will be some benefit when this passes, in terms of, boy, we can work remotely. Boy, there are different ways of doing business. That's good for everybody. That means people with mobility issues don't have to feel that they can't participate, and it really has caused us to look at the world in a very, very different way. So I think we have time to field a few questions. I'm going to suggest that maybe Tim and Mia screen through, so you might have a sense what we could answer on our feet right now. If either of you see something that we could respond to readily, or Brittany, if you have something that we could respond to readily, rather than just reading the question saying, yeah, we'll have to research it.
I can
Yeah,
share.
so I think one of the ones that I saw, Nuala, and one that I can speak about was there was a question about what a municipal construction project is. I discussed how municipal projects were now listed as being able to reopen as of May 4th. And I wanted to read for you guys I know there has not been a lot of guidance put out, and I know the question details the efforts that were put into to look into that as well. And I want to read the actual text because I said municipal projects, but perhaps reading the actual text of what the government has said in the regulation. So that may provide some clarity. So what it actually says is construction projects and services that support the operation of and provide new capacity in schools, colleges, universities, municipal infrastructure, and child care centers within the meaning of the Child Care and Early Years Act 2014. So with respect to those municipal projects, those are construction projects and services that support the operation of and provide new capacity in municipal infrastructure. So their infrastructure project, the construction projects that are able to reopen with respect to municipalities are those that basically create or new capacity in municipal infrastructure. So that for what it's worth, I know that the government hasn't provided a huge amount of guidance for that, but that is slightly different than the turn of phrase I used to suggest it was municipal projects. So again, it's construction projects and services that support the operations of and provide new capacity in, among those other things, municipal infrastructure. So as new guidance becomes available on that, hopefully maybe by the next webinar, we'll be able to do a follow-up on that and have some better answers to everyone. But hopefully reading that bit right from the regulation itself clarifies that it's a specific type of infrastructure. It's infrastructure projects that not just municipal projects in general.
So Tim, what do you think would be an example of that? So we're clear, like road work, bridge repair. What are you thinking?
I think remember it's support the operation of and provide new capacity in. So it's municipal infrastructure. It's providing new capacity. So a bridge repair. Was that one of the examples you gave? A bridge repair. I think that there may be other reasons why a bridge repair may be able to move forward. I don't know that it's specifically contemplated under that, but certainly a new bridge, for example, a new bridge that wasn't there before would provide new capacity. A new roadway would provide new capacity. A new facility for, let's say, a new municipal office, for example. A new municipal office, a new water treatment is, there are some specific regulations around water treatment, but I would say that would be permitted. It may also be permitted under the critical provincial infrastructure construction exemption. So there are, I mean, those are some examples just off the top of my head, but the idea is it's a municipal infrastructure. So in terms of, I guess, the stepwise process that I would go through in terms of trying to mentally work it out would be, first, is it a municipal infrastructure project? Second, is the construction supporting the operation of that infrastructure or providing new capacity to the municipality? So municipal infrastructure, is it providing new capacity? That's probably the key, you know.
Okay, so we'll probably be able to color that in a future session. And before we get to the poll, is Brittany or Mia, did either of you see a question we could answer readily?
Yes, Nuala. I have two quick questions that I can answer right now, and one of them is regarding typing up the first set of minutes after an electronic meeting was held, and whether or not you have to identify who attended electronically, or if they're in council chambers. So my recommendation here would be that you specify how each individual attended the meeting. So whether you were present in council chambers or if the individual attended electronically, I think that should be specified. That way it's recorded, and we make sure that we're following all the rules, and everything is, the electronic meeting is held accordingly. So I would specify how each individual attended that meeting. So I hope that clarifies that question. There's another question here with respect to making electronic meetings accessible to the public, and if live streaming is sufficient to meet the requirements alone, or if the recording of the meeting has to be available online as well. So I would also recommend here that, and I mean, I guess it depends what your bylaw says too with specifics, but I do recommend that obviously that the meeting is recorded, of course, and then it be posted to the website, and immediately as soon thereafter as you have the recording. And that's especially for individuals that, you know, couldn't call in or couldn't attend or whatever, then they can readily access the recording online. With respect to how long does it have to be available online, I'm going to say for as long as you can leave it online. Nuala, I don't know if you have another recommendation to how long it should be up online, but I would say is
you'll need to follow your records retention bylaw for how long the record is retained. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have it available to view. You can have it in any, you can, as long as you have it in your corporate records, however it's held digitally. I think you want to have it up for a reasonable amount of time. So somewhere I would say maybe 3 months, but certainly available to be retrieved and to keep in accordance with your record keeping or record retention bylaw. So I think we're coming to the end of the session. So Brittany, are you able to pull up the poll results? And Tim, with better vision, are you able to read them?
Nuala says I have better vision, but I wear glasses, which I'm not doing now, which was a bad idea today. But so the first question, when do you participate or anticipate, again, bad eyesight, when do you anticipate returning to full staff complement? As you guys can see, by June 1st was 26%, June 15th 11%, by June 30th 29%, and then beyond June 30th was the highest number, which was 34% of those who responded to beyond June 30th. The second question: do you think you have adequate resources to return to full staff complement in the foreseeable future? 76% of people who responded said yes. 24% said no. And so, Nuala, I'll turn back to you to see if you have any comments about the results of the poll, if they're what you were expecting or if they're surprising results.
Well, as regards the returning to full complement in the near future, I'm delighted to hear that. That's fantastic. That's the type of confidence your community really needs to hear. That you have what you need. We're going to get back on the horse and get things back on track. That really is a breath of fresh air to me. I'm absolutely delighted to hear that. When do you think you'll be back? I do think June 1st for full complement is optimistic. I think it'll be later than that, but maybe it's full complement but staged. And I think it's sort of in that bracket somewhere in June. I think you're going to see most municipalities looking at some form of return, and how exactly they lay that out will be seen. And hopefully we'd love to backstop you on that. So when you start to look seriously about bringing everyone back, it's our real pleasure to assist you in that. So with that, to all the mothers, happy Mother's Day this weekend. And to everyone who has a mother, lucky enough to have a mother, say happy Mother's Day, and we hope you'll join us again next week. Thank you very, very much. We'll try and get to the questions in other sessions, or if they're a little bit more involved, we'll reach out and see if we can give you a more one-on-one answer. So thanks everybody, and hopefully see you next Friday. Stay well.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.